Welcome to the Decipher podcast. My name is Dennis Fisher. I'm here with YouTube star John Hammond, who also does some security research on the side. John, thanks for being here, man.
Hey there, Dennis. Thank you so much for letting me join you.
Oh, please. Yeah, happy to have you. So, I wanted to talk to you, have you on today to talk about the CrowdStrike outage, which we've got a little bit of distance from right now. It was about 10 days ago as we're recording this. Um, what were your initial thoughts that Friday when this all started happening and you started seeing what people were saying on Twitter and elsewhere and being like, okay, it looks like the CrowdStrike and update caused this giant outage, but then quickly there were also a lot of like wacky theories coming out. What were your initial thoughts when you looked at it and then sort of figured out what was happening?
Oh my goodness. I know quite a can of worms, but I'll admit I'm over on the West Coast and Pacific time. So I saw some of the chatter and sort of some the start of the fire on really Thursday night. It would have been 10 p.m. Pacific time when I saw just the Reddit thread start to grow with the floodgates open of people chiming in. Hey, we're seeing blue screens of death everywhere,
Yeah.
affecting our endpoints, workstation servers, and at that moment, I'm realizing this is just going to set the world on fire. Without a
And it
doubt,
did.
we've seen airplanes, of course, airlines with their downtime, of course, schools, banks, hospitals, even. Like, I know it was everywhere. But I had that realization that, okay, everyone's going to be chatting about this and we need to start to fight fires the best we could. But uh, now, as you mentioned, hey, we're a little bit distant. We're seeing the recovery, and I think I'll admit, I guess I don't know if everyone's back in action yet. I've seen a lot of the airlines recover, had some travel this past couple of days, but so far now we're just thinking, looking back, like what are the lessons learned? Where do we go from here?
That was the next question I was going to ask you is, these outages happen a lot of times they're isolated. It might be a smaller piece of software or it might be an update that only got rolled out to a few or a small percentage of the company's customers or something like that. And it doesn't draw this kind of attention because it doesn't have the cascading effects that this one had. Um, Aside from, there's a couple ways we can take this, I guess, sort of the practitioner side. If you're someone who had to deal with this, what do you think? I mean, I know you guys deal with the MSSP world. What are some of the lessons that you saw folks taking away from a really widespread severe outage like this?
Ooh. Well, if I may start, I guess, with the bad news, and everyone knows, hey, it was a manual effort to recover. It was every technician, every engineer kind of walking around and hand jamming whatever BitLocker recovery key if you need it, or just getting into safe mode to try to remove some of those channel files that were real root of the problem. And that, I'm sure, sucked. Without a doubt. So when folks tend to ask, hey, what could we have done to prevent this? I don't know. Is there anything we can look towards in the future? I don't. I struggle with this one because it's really hard. It's not something that you could prevent all that easily. It took us by surprise. Normally, you have the conversations of network administrators and system owners saying, well, we weigh the pros and cons of having these automatic updates on from a new patch or hotfix comes out. And that's up to their own decision and their discretion. But this one, coming from the cybersecurity provider,
Yeah.
that was a completely different direction. You didn't have control over it. So a bit of a blind side, but when you're left now, okay, what can we do? What I have seen, and this is the good news. This is the silver lining, if I may. A lot of folks are chiming in. Well, we took this as an opportunity to improve some of our planning, some of our just strategic planning as to look when we have a nightmare scenario like this, who are we going to call? Do we have the numbers? Do we have the contact details for everyone? Do we have a
Mhm.
checklist? Do we have the documented procedure for how we get back in action? What are we thinking about backups? What are we thinking about recovery, etc.? So those, I know I always feel very, very fluffy, but that's the best that we can do when we're trying to fight fires like that.
It's true. And I think, on the enterprise side, if you're a large enterprise that has a dedicated security team, maybe you have internal IR folks, people like that, you probably had some kind of playbook. You knew what to do, even if it took some manual, let's get some USB drives and start running around, recovering these devices. But if you're a small school district or you're, a regional auto parts company or something like that that got hit with this, and all your stuff is outsourced, you might not even have anybody to call that is going to help you right away, you know? So that's those are the folks that end up being in a really tough situation with something like this.
Without a doubt. And if I may, I know we were kind of bantering before we started to record as to just how central this is to a lot of our world, especially when we think about it for cybersecurity, because it's no secret. I work for a vendor, I work for a fellow cybersecurity provider. And, for a lot of the access, for a lot of the permissions and privileges that we need, and anyone, and any XDR, EDR, whatever buzzword we'd like to throw in there, a lot of that means you've got to be working at the kernel, at the low
Right.
level, the root of the operating system, so you can hook these API calls and functions, and you can see the signals and telemetry that really help you make better informed decision to stop actual malware and bad hackers and illicit threat actors. But that's fragile. That's very sensitive, and obviously we've seen that topple over and
Yeah.
choke at quite a scale and severity. But that is when we're starting to have these conversations now. And I'd love to riff with on this. But what does it mean to be in the kernel? Should we be there? Are Microsoft and the other architects of the operating systems we're using? Is there another direction we can go in? And how would that affect the cybersecurity vendors out in the industry?
I was going to ask you this because I saw some speculation last week that Microsoft might start restricting even further who has that kernel level access for drivers because of, I'm sure it's something they talk about all the time
Mm.
because I know they're very, you know, careful with what products actually get that level of access. And I wonder if we're going to start seeing them shrinking that pool of, software and vendors that get that kind of access as, either an indirect or direct result of this.
Well, I have seen, I feel like both ends of the spectrum. I'll admit. I feel like I've seen folks saying, hey, we could take that sort of Apple walled garden approach, a lot
Hmm.
of stuff in lockdown, and maybe that is a fine approach. I guess time will tell. I've also seen folks that kind of look at that and scoff, shrug it off, seeing the conversations and the speculation, but say, no shot. Like that's not going to happen. We're too far gone in the kernel world, and it's just a necessity. And I will admit, and this is just a John opinion, this is just me personally. I think I'd lean in that direction. I am hesitant, and I don't think we'll see too much of a change yet. Maybe we could think on some of those nerdy technical implementations like eBPF or some other opportunities where we'll work in the mix. But I don't know where we'll find a middle ground or if we will even.
I think you might be right because I mean, Apple started that way. It's not a change that they made,
Right,
you
right.
know. Microsoft trying to roll that back at this point. I don't see how that would work in practice. It seems. I think you're right, John. Might be too far down the road.
And I don't mean to be a pessimist there. I'm not trying to sound all
No,
glass
it's
half
just
empty,
realistic.
but
Yeah.
uh, well, we'll do the very best that we can, and we'll be cognizant of the holes, gaps, and try to board up the doors and lock the windows here, whatever we say.
Right. But I tend to fall on your side of the fence on that too. And it's, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just where we are right now because Microsoft's, I don't think they can make a large change like that, at least not anytime in the near future. It's not a switch that they can just flip. Be like, sorry guys, kernel's closed. You guys are out of here. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And one of the other things that this obviously sort of brought to mind for me was just the fragility and interconnectedness of the networks and software ecosystem that we have right now. Yes, there's millions of software apps out there and people use all kinds of different things, but in reality, there's a handful of large providers that everyone relies on, or the vast majority of companies rely on in one way or another. And when something like this happens and it causes a cascading failure and large, airlines, hospitals, 911 systems get affected, that's when you start to see other people that aren't immersed in this sort of stick their head up and be like, oh my God, are we all just reliant on, like, is this it? Like, don't we have some checks and balances here? And the reality is we kind of don't. And I wonder if there's anything that we can actually do about that at this point. We might be too far down that road as well.
Yeah, goodness, man, you're making me sound like a doom and gloom fella here. Not so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt and all, but uh, we we go back and forth on, look, do we want a decentralized solution, should we have a centralized architecture? But it's no secret that they're going to be, I don't want to say market leaders, but that might be the best way to put it, is the
Mhm.
folks that shape and cultivate what the industry looks like. Microsoft, Windows, that's just the prime candidate here. And I don't know of an alternative just because I haven't seen that reality yet. Maybe there is, maybe there will be. I'm not sure. I can't say with any certainty, but I think inevitably that's just kind of going to happen. And we'd hope we're again, we're all very hopeful and thinking like, okay, they'll do that right. They'll take that lead and take that responsibility, and everyone else fighting in the trenches, cybersecurity providers amongst us, will do the very same. But if I may, that's going to be run by people. That's going to be run by us human beings,
Yeah.
and we're going to be fallible and we're going to make mistakes the same way we'll click on a stupid phishing email. Um, we can see mistakes that are small, tiny boo boos, and some that make for a bigger blast radius. Unfortunately, uh, well, we'll have to take it as it comes. But if I may, I think I'd be the first to say this is not a poo poo on CrowdStrike. This could have happened to any provider just like this. But we'll do the very best we can to work through it.
Yeah, I mean, software is written by humans. Humans make mistakes, and these kind of things are going to happen. We haven't seen one on this scale in a very long time. But yeah, I mean, outages and mistakes happen, obviously, but these are the ones that grab everybody's attention and get people in Congress and elsewhere. You see it on like the on Entertainment Tonight and things like that. And you're just like, oh my god, what is going on in this world right now? But um, the maybe couple other things I wanted to ask you about is one of the things that CrowdStrike said after this all came out and sort of their postmortem was they did some testing on this and the general update mechanism that they used in this case, but this update, was sent globally, like you said. It was, an auto update to all their agents. And they said afterwards, hey, we're going to change that a little bit. We're going to start rolling this out to smaller pools of people at, in a sort of staged rollout. Isn't that more of the norm in the way that software updates are deployed? I mean, they're not generally just sent out like, "Hey, everybody, here it is. Good luck."
Yes, and I'll
Okay,
dance with that as politely as I can.
qualified,
Uh,
yes. Qualified, yes. Yeah,
yes, we'd love to hear some of that blue green testing, maybe starting with some smaller sample pools of, hey, 100 customers or clients, maybe to start with, expand that to 1,000, expand that to 10,000, expand that out as we're seeing signs of success. But I would really love a lot more of that internal testing. And
mm,
I know there's the commentary that, hey, this is the process that they've used for years. This is what has supposed to have been be tested and have its own bug checker. But there's a bug in the bug checker. So if there were a small little sandbox or something to even test, look, do we have a health check? Do we have a heartbeat? Is there a pulse from the systems that we've got in our own QA workflow and process? Uh, I think we'd egregiously see, blue screens of death en masse.
yeah,
This is something we can get out in front of. Um, but again, I won't pretend to know. Um, I don't know the inside of CrowdStrike and all that they're up to, but I hope and I'm glad that there are some lessons learned.
yeah. I'm sure there are. Yeah, I mean, there's smart people there, obviously. Any other any other broad thoughts from this, John? Things that sort of popped up for you as you've been looking at it the last week or so, that folks should keep in mind as we go forward.
There is another thread that I might pull on,
Sure.
especially considering we know the root of the problem, we know the crux of the issue, and the CrowdStrike outage. But this is something that other threat actors and other adversaries will totally capitalize on and try to take advantage of, spreading a lot of that uncertainty and chaos with, I don't know, maybe some rogue, malicious scam phone calls, trying to say, "Hey, we're from CrowdStrike and we'd like to help work through this issue," but they're just masquerading and impersonating and leading into what will turn into more access to your computer and more damage to be done. So, fake websites, fake domains that have popped up, fake phishing emails, all this. And I know SZA had kind of chimed out and said,
Yeah.
hey, we are seeing a lot of activity surrounding this. So, it's something to really keep your ear to the ground. And I don't want to say stay vigilant, as everyone does, but go to the source, look for what CrowdStrike is up to and what they will share themselves. But be especially cognizant of other ill-intended actors that will take advantage of it.
That's a great point. Yeah, CISA did send out an alert, I think that Friday, like
Yeah,
pretty quickly after the whole thing
just as
happened.
out right off. Yeah.
Yeah. And CrowdStrike themselves, I think, in their initial or very quickly updated their blog post to say, listen, make sure you are talking to an official CrowdStrike representative. Be wary of people trying to take advantage of this. And we've already seen phishing campaigns and all sorts of things like that. And I'm sure there will continue to be those. That's a great point because it, cybercrime groups are going to take advantage of anything like this. And this, even smaller things that you don't think are a big deal, they use to their advantage for lures. And something like this is just like a golden opportunity for them, honestly. Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, to wrap it up, hey, I don't mean to sound all doom and gloom again. I'm not wanting to be all that FUD, but I actually have had some very sweet interactions with the CrowdStrike team following this because I, tried to chat with some reporters and journalists in PR, and they said like, "Hey, thank you, John, for taking this with the grace that you could because we know it's a crappy situation. Obviously, they're living through it, and they're the people on the other side of the
Yeah.
screen on the keyboard just as well. So, if I may just add that reminder to anyone tuning in, all the IT folks that you're chatting with, or maybe even some folks that are on the inside, that they're working through the best they can, and someone you do have to have some extra courtesy and empathy with when it's people at the end of it.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, John, thanks so much for your time, man. It was great to see you.
Thank you, Dennis. This was a blast. Thanks
All
again.
right. See ya.